Can everybody hear me? I can't hear you. Yes. There you go. Thank you. Well, I have a little bit of a different story to tell. I was born in Poland. My name is Esther Loeb. I was born in the city of Lodz, L-O-D-Z. But as a little girl, when we moved to a city of Bromberg, it was a beautiful, beautiful city with statues and parks and flowers, theaters, picture shows. We had canals with boats floating for dancing and dinners. It was beautiful. Unfortunately, we were not allowed to some of the restaurants or even the theaters and not even the picture shows. I have suffered tremendously being in public school. They used to call me different names. I didn't know why. They wouldn't play with me. And as a little girl, it hurt that nobody else wanted to play with me. I couldn't understand why when they start calling me a dirty Jew. I couldn't understand why am I any different than anybody else. But that was part of life. And then in 1939, September 1st, the war broke out. My parents had 2 stores ready to wear men's clothing. They had a nice home. We were not too rich, but we were well-to-do. And a friend of my mother's, a German lady, she said, you better take your kids and you better run away and go deeper into Poland, because if the Germans going to come in, they're going to destroy each and every Jew. That's what she said. That was on September 1st, 1939. It was long before there were concentration camps. She knew it, which we did. Mother sent me and my sister to her sister to the city of Lodz, which was in the middle of Poland. And then my dad and my mom walked for 2 weeks while the Germany was bombing Poland. They were hiding in the daytime and travel at night to come to the city of Lodz so we can be together. And they finally did it in 2 weeks. After 3 weeks, the Poland was taken. And that's when just a little tragedy started happening. The sadistic little things that started happening. For example, they have seen, let's say the German soldier has seen a young man or an elderly man with a beard. They called them over and talked to them. While they were talking, they took out a cigarette, pretending to light the cigarette. And while they had that match, talking to the young man with the beard, they put the match to his beard. And the man was crying, screaming with agony, started to run. Those are the little things they did. They have taken old women. They have given them a brush and a bucket, and they told them to scrub the sidewalks backwards. So they couldn't raise their knees to go backward, but they had to slide them on the concrete. So they were bleeding profoundly and were in pain. And finally, when they told them it's over, they told them to get up. They were old people there. It was hard for them to get up. They needed somebody to help them to get up. And if somebody walked over and tried to help them, they beat them up. And there was the awkward position, these old women trying to get up. And the more awkward it was, the better they liked it. They stood there and laughed. And they decided they want about 150 young men and women, age 18 to 25. No parents wanted to give their children away for something they didn't know where they're going to go. But eventually they said, if we're not going to get them, we're going to get 10 people and shoot the first, the third, or the 10th one. And that happened for 3 days. They did. Shot one, it was the first one. Second day they shot the one, it was the 5th one. And the third one they shot, it was the 2nd. And they finally got their wish. They got 150 young men and women, age 18 to 25. They put them on trucks, and they took them away. And we didn't know where they were. After about 5 or 6 days, the truck came back but there was about half of these young men and women on the trucks. And if the parents or the sister or the mother or the father, whoever ran to the trucks and asked, where's my daughter, or where's my wife, or where's my sister? They got beat up. And they said, how dare you question a German soldier? What happened? They brought him into a forest. All these 100 and almost 150 people. They separate half of them. They left half of them to dig a ditch, a big ditch. And the other half of the men and women they tortured them, beat them, raped them, and killed them. And they brought these bodies back with a truck where they dug the ditch. And they just threw them in and covered the ditch with branches so nobody will know there was ever a grave there. And told the rest of these young men and women, if you ever tell what happened here, we're going to kill your whole families. They never said, at the time, they have never said what happened. They have done the most terrible little things, like we were standing in line to get a piece of bread. All the stores were closed. There were just a few stores open where they have given some provision. And you had to wear a yellow band with a big Morgan David star with a big J. It was for being Jewish. And if he saw a person with a star coming close to the store, he took him gently out from the line and put him way back in the back. Little things like that. And my parents decide we're going to have to escape. There's no way we're going to live like that. At night, they used to knock on the door and come in with those heavy boots, coming in, throwing chairs away like they were looking for something. Everybody was paralyzed with fear, scared to death. Some people have heart attacks. They didn't know what they wanted. They just come in, burst into the house like looking for something, hollered and screamed, and then they left. Didn't know what happened. It was a chaos. Everybody was afraid to get out. Everybody was shaking, just afraid to get out. They stayed inside the house. My parents decided we're going to have to escape this German. We're going to have to escape. I don't know how it happened, who they talked to. All I know that I remember coming to a river, and there were small boats that take us across to Ukraine, which we did. Coming to Ukraine, trying to escape the Nazis, there were Ukrainian soldiers and taking everything from us, everything we had. We just left us with the clothes we had on. And it was pouring. It was raining. It was so cold. We were hungry, thirsty, cold. We didn't know where we are. We had nothing, no money to buy anything. There was an elderly couple. She walked over to my mother and says, I have a little barn. You can stay there for a little while. And we stayed there for a little while. There was a knock on the door. And here come the Russian soldiers. And they told us to get out and come with them. They accused my parents of being spies. And my father says, I'm a Polish citizen. I'm trying to take my family away from the Nazis before they kill us. I'm trying to survive, and we're trying to escape them. So I certainly am not a spy. He says, if you're not going to sign this document, we're going to send you to Siberian prison. He says, you can take me wherever you want to, or send me wherever you want to, but I will not sign anything. And sure enough, they put us on a freighter. I don't even remember how long we were at sea. I was so sick. We were all so terribly, terribly sick. And finally, from the freighters, they put us on freight trains, and we drove, I don't know how long, and they put us on the trucks, and we finally came to Siberia. Well, I hate to tell you how cold. That wind was howling all the time, and it was so white that it hurt your eyes. You couldn't open your mouth because if you open your mouth, your tongue stuck to your lips or to your teeth. It just froze. You had to walk like this and you couldn't even talk. You couldn't breathe, you couldn't take a deep breath. It was so terribly cold. And they brought us to long, big barracks with shattered windows. And the doors were off the hinges. And they had a small little tiny room for each family. And there were concrete floor with a little straw on it. And that's where we stayed. We had to get up early in the morning to go to work in all that freezing weather. We only had some paper, newspapers to cover ourselves, to put it underneath our clothing so the wind will not penetrate our bodies. It was so terribly cold. Everybody had frostbitten fingers and toes and ears and tips of the nose. But if you didn't work, you didn't eat. And the food was once a day. They give you a big cup of a borscht. And if you find a few pieces of cabbage or a few pieces of potato peels, you were very lucky. And you had to share. There were 4 of us, and we had to share between us every day. Eventually, my father got sick. He was burning up with fever, and he couldn't get up and go to work. And my sister and I used to go out to the guide and ask him, would you please give us some medicine or send us to a doctor? He said, what for? You're going to die here anyway. And then we got one that he said, there's a clinic not too far away, about a quarter of a mile from here. Maybe if you take your father there, maybe they'll save him. And my sister and I took my father one arm, and she did on the other arm. And we almost carried him a quarter of a mile in all that snow and freezing weather, and he was burning up. And we finally came to that clinic, and they put him on a cot and gave him 2 aspirin. And he just laid there. And my mother had a little boy. The boy was 7 days old when my father passed away. He was 36 years old. He was a handsome man, full of life for his family. He had a beautiful voice. He was a beautiful person. And they put him in a coffin, was all dilapidated, and they put him on a sled. And my sister and I walked behind the sled. And they had a big hole in the cemetery, and they just dropped that coffin there. I have no idea where he was buried. And then we had to tell our mother that my father passed away. And she lost milk in one of her breasts and didn't have much milk in the other breast. And the child was absolutely starving. So we went to the guy and asked him, for God's sake, is there a farm around here so we can get a little milk for the baby? He said, there is one about 6 miles from here. If you can make it, if you can get a little bit, maybe they'll give you a little bit. And my sister and I walked 6 miles in all the snow and cold weather and begged for a little bit of milk. And finally they did give us. And we held it close to our bodies so we'll not freeze. And Mother used to take a piece of foil, make a little holes, and just drip the milk in the child's mouth. But the child died anyway of malnutrition. There were brutality also, there were beating and rape, and there was sickness and diseases. There was death, freezing weather, hard work. We had no barbed wires, but we had nowhere to run. Old men and women used to get out of the house, I call it a house, out of the room, and lay themselves in the snow and fell asleep and froze to death so their family will have a little bit more food to share with so they can survive. And that's how it was for 3.5 years. It was horrible. It was just unbelievable how people survived. I don't know how we survived. My mother didn't want to live many times. She just didn't want to get up at all. And we hugged and kissed and loved her. He said, you have 2 daughters. You have to live for us. Well, thank God she listened. Then they sent us to Kyrgyzstan, which was a little warmer, naturally. And we stayed there for about 1.5 years. After 1.5 years in 1945, they said, you're free to go. You can go back to Poland, which was Russia anyway. We came back and there was nobody left from my mother's side or my father's side. They were all gone. It was just my mother and my sister and I. So they sent us to a DP camp in Landsberg in Germany. It's a displaced person camp. And in 1947, I got patriotic, and I enlisted with the Haganah to go to Palestine at the time. And end of 1947, we went to Palestine, and we had to smuggle ourselves through because the English were there, and we were not allowed to get in. I was 2 years in the army. I lived for 6 years in Israel. I had a little bit of part in the liberation of Palestine. It was May 14, 1948, when Palestine became Israel. And I'm very proud of being there. In 1954, I came to these United States, where my mother and my sister were here. And I met my husband, a nice Southern gentleman. He taught me how to read and write and speak English, because I didn't know. My mama always said, just say no. And that's all I was saying is no. Well, anyway, I married that guy. I was happily married for 37 years. I have one son. He works at Vanderbilt. I'm very proud of him. I have my sister lives here about 5 minutes from me. She has 2 daughters, and she's a grandmother, and I'm proud of her too. So we're becoming a little small family. So this is United States. God bless it. It's a wonderful, wonderful country. I've been around, but there is no place like United States. And we certainly do appreciate it, you being here tonight and listening to our stories.